Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy Liebmann, CEO and Chief Shopper at WSL Strategic Retail, and this is Future Shop. I'm delighted to have as my guest today, Andy Murray. Andy's been on this podcast before, the guru in all things shopper, customer experience, worked for some of the biggest companies in the world, from Procter & Gamble to Walmart, to Asda in the UK, as well as businesses in the US. And so he has an extraordinary perspective on all things consumer, shopper, and retail in this day and age. So, Andy, I am delighted to have you. Welcome to Future Shop.
Well, thanks for having me, Wendy. It's such a pleasure to be back with you again. It's always cool to sit and talk with a fellow industry guru that loves everything shopper and all the pieces that go with that. So I couldn't wait to get back on.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who haven't followed Andy in recent moments, Andy and his wife have just endowed a chair at the Walton School of Business. I should get that all right, shouldn't I? The Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas in customer-centric leadership. Be still my beating heart. So thank you for doing that. That's extraordinary. And it just continues to evolve all the work he's been doing over the years, some 30 years in the CPG and retail space. So as always, excited to have you. It was great to see you over the summer. You came to Boston and you were our keynote. Why am I telling you? He was our keynote in Boston at the Future of Commerce 2030 event that we co-sponsored with the Emerson Group. And he really set the stage for what the future of commerce will look like. And it was exhilarating, and delighted to have you here to sort of end the year and begin the year where you and I always begin. I always say, to quote or misquote James Carville, the Democratic pundit, not to get political, it's the shopper stupid, or although
Correct.
We could go back and say it's the economy stupid, and both pieces would work. Andy, it's been a busy year for you. It's been a crazy year for most of us, I think, including the shoppers. What's changing in the life of shoppers, and where do you think we're headed over the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Well, if I knew for sure where we're going over the next 24 months,
How about next week?
We should get a Polymarket account and see where this is all going, right? And put some bets out there.
But
right. You know what? It's just really strange because it's like everything's changing, but then in some ways, nothing's changing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of both at the same time. And, so many macroeconomic factors. When I start looking at, for me, it's always good to go, well, see, in retail, we call them the customer. We didn't use the word shopper as much. In the agency world, we said shopper. It was called shopper marketing and all of that, right? So we said shopper. And then in the CPG world, we use the word consumer. And so it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, what are we really talking about here in terms of, how all this comes together? But I think that from a customer, consumer, shopper perspective, boy, what an exciting time. And they're so far ahead of retail and so far ahead of brands with a agent assisted shopping and what they could do. So from a possibility, it's really exciting, but from an economy and headwinds and, how they're facing the holiday and coming out of Black Friday, I do see some shopper trends that are starting to change based on this kind of K-shaped economy where there's the wealthy shopper, the boomer side versus Gen Z. I mean, you study shoppers. Are you seeing some of those same kind of bifurcations?
Yeah, I think that's the right word, bifurcation. I mean, everybody, a lot of people sort of inside the ballpark, we're all talking about this K-shaped economy. There's no doubt. I think we all look at it and say, is there a middle anymore? And should we even be thinking about the middle, the aspiration, but I think there is. And I'm curious in your view, what I didn't mention in the introduction to everybody, that Andy is also, I mean, his litany of successes, was the founder of Saatchi & Saatchi, so that when he talks about, as we think about marketing and shopper marketing, he was on the ground at the very early days of all of this. So as you talk about that, I think a lot myself about, we say this K-shaped economy, but we've got people who are quite comfortable shopping as if they're not, depending on what they want. And, you see in the parking lot at Aldi's and Lidl's now, you see, BMWs and Lexus. Why would
That's
I
right.
spend money I don't have to spend? So you've got that kind of trade down or trade to the middle. And you still have the aspirational shoppers, the Walmart shoppers, the shoppers who are,
Yeah.
signing up for Walmart Plus and looking at the efficiencies of time versus money. And so that middle bit is the thing that I'm so intrigued by as well, because it's not the middle class per se, as we all grew up. It feels like there's something else going on. How do you see that sort of muddy middle, I'm going to call it?
Yeah, well, certainly value has always been important, but I think we talk about convenience, price, value, quality, a lot of those different drivers. But I think in this particular time period, that middle side, value is more important. They're a little bit,
Yeah.
but also it's really interesting. So Black Friday had some pretty good numbers posted, but as you get into it, a lot of it's the basket sizes were smaller.
Yeah.
And even though the prices were higher, it's because the price was a little bit higher, but people are getting more choosy about what is it I'm going to buy and more thoughtful about it, especially in the middle and in the Gen Z. They're a bit skint. I heard for the first time this week as I started looking at the Black Friday results, there's called vibe shopping, which is kind of the Gen Z version. It's a TikTok influence of what they see. It's their path to purchase is different. They don't do it in a traditional way as an average would. It's a bit more being influenced through social media on what to buy and more so than anything else. And so, the middle, I think, is harder to define and get my head around because we see the boomer side overspending, probably buying gifts for the grandkids because they don't have the money, and the Gen X side that they used to be able to do it. So we're seeing more clarity on the two ends. The middle is a bit muddy to me as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a lot's being written about the middle, except they are more acceptable for value. They look for value a bit more so than previous. Brands are important, but they're not the main thing, and that's why the Aldi. And I was in the UK, and then Aldi
Hmm.
experience there is a little different in the US, but it is they don't have that same stigma as it
Yeah.
perhaps like a hard discounter view in the US.
Yeah.
It just and the quality of the products are really good. Part of it too, Wendy, I'm curious, is like the private brands or owned brands by
Hmm.
retailers are getting better in almost
Yeah.
every category. I don't follow the beauty category as much as I know you do,
Hmm.
but it just seems like they're getting higher and higher market share.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I think, to your point about this, what value really means to people today,
Yeah.
I think, and, when you talk about things like Agentic AI and all the new technologies and TikTok and those social commerce channels, we have a much better informed shopper wherever they are.
Yes.
If they're interested in better prices, lower prices, special ingredients, anything that they're interested in is now, in their hand, right? They can
Right.
do their homework and then shop accordingly. And I think that's changed the structure or their own autonomy. The other thing we've been seeing in our How America Shops research, particularly coming through this last couple of years of chaos, but really a decade of chaos, if you will, is that, shoppers are really trying to take control more. And
Yes.
so I think technology informs that as well. So I absolutely agree with you. I mean, whether it's Costco's Kirkland brand or special everything's, or whether it's walking into an Aldi and buying, I saw the huge big container of protein powder, their own brand, whatever. They just figured people are coming in and they want protein powder at a price and they don't want to be paying $25, $35, $40. Why not at Aldi? And I think, that educated shopper who's trying to keep a handle on what's going on is the other piece to that puzzle, which I find really interesting. You also you alluded to very early in this piece to
Yeah.
AI, agentic AI. What's your view on that bright, shiny thing, or really going to change a consumer world, not just a corporate world for efficiencies?
Well, I think the consumer is there. I mean, Adobe came out with some analysis that like there's 800% increase
Hmm.
in AI assisted shopping through Black Friday. I mean, it's there. So I think the consumer's ahead of retailers.
Yeah.
The consumer's ahead of most brands.
Mm.
I did a focus group with about 15 Gen Zers at the University of Arkansas,
Hmm.
just sitting and talking to them
Hmm.
about how they shop and what they do. And, ask them like, how do you shop? And they all talked about this app called Yuka, which I'd never heard about. And I'm like, okay, I've not heard about this. And so what is it? And they all like, how many of you guys have it? And they all did. Almost all of them had downloaded it, but it gave them complete transparency or control of what ingredients from beauty categories to, it's good for your health or good for you. And then it suggests an alternative. There's no ads. It is done by a nonprofit of scientists that go and do that, but they're looking for what's real, I think, and what's truthful and what's good. And yet you don't go to any retailer's site on their e-commerce. It doesn't give you that information. It's not available. Most brands don't put that on their website. And so as you look at that, it's like, wow, they're ahead of us again. And so that is kind of an interesting thing to look at, is how are they getting ahead of us and how do we catch up to what they're able to do? But I think you hit it spot on. It's getting more control over their environment. And the other thing that came out of that focus group that was really interesting is how many of the students talked about valuing going into a physical store. And as we got underneath that, it was a bit around, they're so tech oriented. That is a physical touch. And I remember a quote from Nicholas Negroponte that said, the more technology advances and gets more sophisticated in our lives, the more there's a demand for physical touch and humanity and connection grows as a counterbalance. And I think we're seeing that of this is a bit, get away from the screen time, go into a physical place and be able to touch, feel, and see a sensory environment. I didn't expect that out of the Gen Z group at all. I thought that was maybe that's just our generation, but actually they are valuing it probably even more than we do.
Yeah. Well, I'm smiling. For those of you who are just listening to this, I'm smiling at Andy because we see it even in our group, in our company.
Really?
Absolutely. Yuka, I first came across it because we have 2 or 3 on our team who religiously look at what's in the product, certainly beauty, but in food and other categories, very much focused on that and very digitally engaged in lots of other things. As I say, it's in their hand most of the time. But the other piece, exactly to your point, is also more engaged in the physical experience, but that sense of community, sense of connection, going with friends, the efficiency of the way they've learned to shop or the technology enhanced way they've learned to shop. They even express, looking at TikTok or any of the social platforms as a way of connection, even though it's, obviously not my direct friends and family. And we had the long conversation recently because I sort of, to your point about the pendulum, I was saying to somebody that I look at TikTok and I think about it in the context of what television shopping was. When television shopping first came to bear, and we did research around it, people were sort of misled by who the television shopper was, who was at QVC, who was at HSC, and they always thought they were people who were shut-ins, they couldn't get out to the store, they were large size, so they needed whatever, 25x something, whatever, and were quite disparaging about who those people were. When we did our research with them, we discovered they were people who loved to shop in lots of places, loved the engagement with the host, and so even though it was at arm's length, they were very engaged in the experience and were very big shoppers. I mean, as in buying, not just browsing. And so I think about TikTok and TikTok Shop now. And now you see QVC with their own TikTok Shop and, skyrocketing again. So what's changed and what hasn't changed, there's certainly both. And that pendulum keeps just swinging back and forth. Nicholas was right, back and forth.
It does. And I think a lot of retailers over the last, I'd say 7 years, have probably moved away from the importance of that human experience in stores because performance marketing, e-commerce, you can measure all that. The amount of KPIs we can invent on those digital things are finitely measured, and measurement drives behavior.
Yeah.
And yet, when I started in shopper marketing in 99, and we had to talk about what's it's going to do and how we change it, we had to go really to insight-based research to really understand the principles. And then from those principles, we would execute, right? Yeah. And so we, just like your company would be a great source of information for us to understand what's the potential for these areas. But those are not necessarily, those areas of human emotion reaction don't show up in performance KPIs that you could take to a CFO and say, this is why we need to invest in the in-store environment or they're really hard to invest in. And I think we're starting to see that. And that's why a lot of retailers, I think, have fallen behind it's really hard to get the capital committee to invest in customer experience if you can't show the math of what's it going to really do. So unless it's cost down labor savings or something like that, or click-through rates or increased checkout baskets, all those more tactical things, the whole value of the human experience starts to fall down the list for a lot of retailers that maybe used to have a much better experience, but now maybe on their back feet, looking at, where the stores are, and are they as exciting as they could be? Are they easy to shop as they could be? Do they pay attention to the smells and the sounds and the feeling of being in a great shop? I think Costco does a great job of it. Trader Joe's, of course, Ulta Beauty. There's several that do, but it's an area that I think is kind of exciting to see come back, because I think they're starting to get recognized. There's something there that's important. I mean, 85% of shopper decisions are still made on emotion.
Right.
We're not logical people. And so, we have to be able to do that. But the emotion is the hardest to measure from an empirical side.
Yeah. And I think, when you say that again, it always warms the cockles of my heart, as my mother would have said, within the context of how do I measure that level of engagement, not just profitability, engagement that leads to hopefully long-term engagement, long-term profitability. How do I find whatever this magic KPI might be on that as people start to talk about my store or my place, my Walmart, my CVS, my Ulta, fill in the blanks. And I think you're absolutely right. Nobody runs around at the moment and says, my Amazon. You look at places like a Starbucks that I think we're all in awe of in the early days, where there was that third place. Right. And then it became so efficient that it lost the smell of the coffee and the sound of the music and that sense, even if you have no time to sit there, the possibility of that. And now they're working hard to bring that back. And so I agree with you. I think the consumer, customer, shopper, obviously they each have different meanings in some contexts, but the human, that we see the human who in these times of chaos, which seems to be forever these days, and generations, as you said, like Gen Z, who've only known this kind of chaos in their lives, economic, political, technological, all of that, social, looking for a different kind of relationship with the physical place and the people in that place. That to me is an area that I feel, is so missing in most of the retailers that you and I spend time looking at or working with. And I think that's the opportunity in the next, my prediction for the coming years.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if I were a retailer right now, I would covet my physical store environment, because the battle on just counting on e-commerce traffic, organic traffic, or paid traffic, and I think the relationship's going to be with their personal agent on a digital front. That personal agent is going to mean more, because the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, and that, those that are going to have the shopping, connection availability, they're not after attention with the consumer. They're after attachment. They want you really attached to this thing that's going to feel like it knows me better than anybody else. And so if it can disintermediate me going through a Walmart.com, then to, it just does it for me. So what do you really have then? You've got that physical space that is, you're still going to compete and work in that, but you can totally own your physical environment. And what does it mean, and how does it feel to shoppers that no agent's going to touch? They might assist you a little bit in the in-store space, but not much. It's the physical space.
And then, which raises the big question as we think about, my topic is, it's the shopper stupid, is we are still, though, at this point where we have to say to ourselves, how many of those physical spaces do we need? How big do they need to be? How small do we need? I mean, we've got this discussion still going on about channels. And I'm like, did we not get the message that shoppers don't care about a channel? They care about, this place. Is it relevant to them? Can I use it? Can I order online, pick up in store? Can I go into the store? Can I use my app? All of those things. What worries me about this discussion still about channel is that it sounds like a business organizational principle, right? And a P&L against the channel and the staffing against that channel. And you say to yourself, this is not consumer centric for a minute. and so that's the other piece that I'm, noodling over. And I'd love your thoughts on that as a principle for the future.
Well, it's interesting. I felt that way a long time, and I know you've
Hmm.
said it for many years. It's not, the channel's not a word the consumer
Hmm.
even thinks about. And yet, yeah, I was at the Path to Purchase Institute's
Hmm.
live thing a month ago or so, maybe less than that. And eMarketer released some new data. And one of the things that it was the first time they put data to this issue because the question was around retail media networks and how come they're kind of stuck right now. Retailers are having a really tough time. And they got to the question of how are your incentives done? Do you guys share common objectives? Is there how many of your organizations have a common KPI for measuring
Hmm.
success? And only 23% of respondents of all the hundreds of retailers said they have a total company view of the customer. Almost everybody measured their KPIs by channel. And they talked about the channel competition inside retail between the e-commerce objectives and the store
Hmm.
objectives. And sometimes none of them are connected to the merchant objectives. Is like what you're saying. There is now data to say that these companies do have a problem when trying to move forward in a holistic way to the customer because the incentive structures,
Right.
the KPIs are competing with each other
Right.
inside the retailers. And I've
Right.
never seen the data. I've always felt it.
Right.
But now they're starting to see the data show up
Yeah.
as a real barrier
Yeah.
for the kind of accelerated innovation to meet the customer who's thinking end to end.
Yeah. And I think it goes back exactly to the point you've made several times today. It is that the customer shopper is way ahead of the rest of us. And
Yes.
so if as a consumer packaged goods company or a big national retailer or even a regional retailer, if we're not looking at it, the customer shopper that way, we are not serving them well, and we're certainly not serving ourselves and our internal teams well. I will say the thing I find both fascinating and aggravating of late, in my being on the road like you are, big companies that we've known for a long time who are now saying, well, we're going to put the customer in the center of everything. I'm like, well, what the hell were you doing beforehand?
Before.
And of course they weren't. They were thinking about their category or their brand. They were focused on category management, which is another thing I'm ready to throw out the window. Thank you. But let's not go there today. That's the next time we talk. But again, thinking about that, the other thing that comes to my mind, and I'm curious about your point of view on it, is with the complexity of what we have, people willing to shop in so many places. We see that in our data. 12.9 different types of retail in a 3-month period, not just shop, buy from. Steady for a long time. If they use social commerce, they buy from even more places. So you sort of see all the new iterations of shopping opportunity. Expand that network, I suppose is the word for that, or that ecosystem. So all of a sudden you've got all of that going on, all the digital tools that are enabling that. And I don't know how as an organization, there is a question here. I don't know as an organization how you even keep track of it unless you put the human that you're trying to have a relationship with in the center of all that. I don't
Yes.
I mean, when you think about the school and the work you're doing and the students you've been talking to, is that grounded in the way you're thinking these days
It
and the
is
way
in the
they're
way.
thinking?
Yes and no. It's grounded
Hmm.
the way I think, not there.
Hmm.
So the university world is still siloed on marketing versus a
Hmm.
sales merchant
Hmm.
school disciplines and stuff like that. So they're not coming out with that. I would say in Europe, a lot of the marketing roles, I think it's a structural issue at the top. You need to have, in my opinion, a chief customer officer that really has ownership of the touch points from the product management of the e-commerce environment, what that feels like
Hmm.
all the way through. It's not about marketing. It's about the total customer relationship. And many of the retailers in the UK, they don't have a CMO. They
Hmm.
have a chief customer officer. And that's the marketing is only a piece of that. And then you get that integration at the leadership level. So you could talk about, the hours you're putting against customer service. You've got somebody to fight for that, where a CMO doesn't typically care for that,
Hmm.
right? Care about that as much. And I think it's a structural thing in retail. I do see more of that starting to happen in the US markets where they start putting the customer first. And that's when I came back from the UK. That's why I wanted to talk about. It's like, look, we're not even educating our students in this way, to where the customer, you can really elevate it to a boardroom level
Hmm.
conversation to be there. But you look at like no retailer in their right mind wants to do anything with last mile delivery. It's not efficient. It's not profit. It's margin dilutive, but yet everybody invested to do it. Why is that? Because the customer demanded it. Now, you look at the last, 3 years, how much money and capital has been putting into retail media networks. So you say, well, how's the customer driving that? Well, I haven't found a shopper yet that says, I want a more relevant ad on no, it's driven by profit.
Right.
Let's be clear. It's driven by an alternative revenue, high profit opportunity. It's moving a lot of money into that, but no customer asks for it, right? And so, that's why it's difficult to get clarity on how does all this advertising work, because it's not customer driven. But now with Agentic, where you can have a really, or AI assisted, you've got they solve the relevant problem because it knows me, right? And so now I think the chase is going to be the biggest massive disruption is going to be how do we make ourselves fit for agentic shopping, which that gap was created because we never did leverage that first party data and the billion to make anything more relevant. I would go on any retailer's site and it never really evolved over the last 5 years with billions of money spent to be any more relevant to me than it was, 7 years ago. So I think that is it's the customer. When the customer says we're going to do this, the retailers follow, right? And so I think that's once you see it and like, look at the drive-through experience with Chick-fil-A, no doubt, like the best, right? And so you look at if I was going to reinvent a pharmacy drive-through, your benchmark's a Chick-fil-A drive-through. It's not another pharmacy at another crappy retailer. It's going to be what they see as what pickup should be, right? And so I think the customer also has a broader view of what excellence looks like and are demanding that.
Yeah, I think that's so. Again, for those of you listening, not looking, I'm smiling with a Cheshire cat grin because Andy and I, it's like preaching to the converted. To have when you don't have the customer in the center, see now I'm talking customer. If you don't have the customer in the center of it, you're absolutely sorry. With the person in the center of it, what is and we see this from our retailers, right? They keep looking at the people who look like them and say, oh no, we're better than that, as opposed to looking at the human and saying, no, but the human is at Chick-fil-A. And that's what a drive-through experience really does look like. The human is in, a Trader Joe's where it's only people and so many people and it's only private brand and their expectations of whimsy and humor and quality and price are all in this little tiny, space. And so I think, all of that, I worry, one of the things I worry about, and I'm usually the eternal optimist, but one of the things I worry about is that in the pressure from many companies, retailers and brands to rethink themselves in the last couple of years with all the, again, chaos, is that ability to think innovatively, that's even a word, but innovate in real, meaningful ways with the customer, the human in the center. I will really worry that we've lost so much of that. And that to me is both, as you said in the beginning, we are in exciting times with all the technology and all the change and all the opportunity. And that's a piece to me that, I hope all your students in your program are really hungering for, because it makes retail a very compelling place. And if you're in Bentonville, you're not in the retail business anymore. You're in the tech business.
You're in a platform business.
Whatever that is, but you're right. It is a big fat platform, right? How big is that platform?
Yeah. And what I kind of worry about is, we've lost the ability because we went to using data for everything.
Yeah.
And what we're missing now is the insight. And it's kind of like the craft of what your company does, as an example. I'm just saying, look, you understand this more than anyone, that, if you want innovation, it has to start with what's a customer problem we're solving, a shopper problem we're solving, and where do you get that problem? And it comes through listening, being in touch, asking questions, being with the shopper, getting in the trenches with them. And then you observe and get that insight. And I think I've never seen a spreadsheet give me a good insight. And I remember a day where the insight you had about how a consumer why they buy your brand, that insight was your best IP.
Yeah.
Because if you had some insight, I remember working with Pampers back in the day, years ago with P&G, and they had this insight that, when the baby reaches up and touches the mom's face, the baby's happy. That makes the mom happy. And that insight had to be filtered through all the Pampers in some little way about the truth about that brand. And you don't hear anybody talk about that anymore, right? And that's why you would never put a baby by itself. Huggies does,
Right.
but they didn't have the same insight. And so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
almost had to get into a vault to get that insight so
Yeah.
you'd know how to do the advertising. But I feel like that's a returning thing.
Yeah.
And there's very few companies that have the practice muscle that you have. I'm not trying to sell what you do, Wendy, but
Thank you.
I'm just
Please
saying
do. Please do. It's fine.
what is old is new again.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
I'm not even sure there's a lot of marketing competency to know how to go
Yeah.
get a deep insight.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say it because one of your alma mater has expressed it publicly and personally that, they went from being this, as you noted with that example, such leaders in insight. And then, all of a sudden you could have data anywhere. Big data, right? Big data everywhere.
Right.
And so people became analysts and they didn't learn that. And you're absolutely right, that skill, because it is the art and science of what is that? What question should I ask? Who should I be listening to? Your example, in old school, excuse the expression, way of having 15 of your students sit around a table and ask them questions about life is such, it's not difficult to do, even if you just bring all the people that you employ in your company. We're lucky, small group, very diverse, and everybody has a different story, and just listening to that doesn't have to be your quantitative support for it, but you begin to listen. You watch people on the subway. It's my big, all my ideas come from the subway. But watch people on just observe, take the moment to observe. So I know I don't have to convince you on all of that, but you and I have talked about this when you came back from London and the Asda work, and there you talked about the unique role, not of a chief marketing officer, but a chief customer officer. That to me was a moment that I think was a moment, and then it dissipated to some degree. And now you're right, everybody's chasing the profitability of retail media without understanding who's really in who is this for and who does it benefit beyond, P&L.
Well, one of the biggest insights I got from that role, coming from more of a marketing role into that, was because I had the call center responsibilities, not for the execution of it, but for its KPIs and how it interacted. And to go spend a day on the call center, just listening to the calls come in and the kind of problems the customer, it was gold. And often I would take and pull clips off of the audio stream and play it at the board meetings, executive meeting, to hear what the customers say. And, we're so efficiency performance related. I remember one problem we were trying to solve was, we're not, we're not closing out these calls fast enough. They're on the phone too long. And so we need to get better scripts. So Andy, can you write better scripts that we could solve this? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Let's dive into this a little bit. Let's go listen to some calls and see what's going on. Right. And what we found was that, somebody came in and changed all of the voice, the phone calls, the phones that used to ring at the store level went to one call center at the time, for them to be answered. And almost a large percent of the calls was somebody saying, do you have this in stock right now at the store? That was the call coming in from the customer. Well, it's routed to a central person. So they have to put the person on hold, call the store, find out, come back, get back on there. And it's like, you guys don't need new scripts. You fundamentally have changed, the way the shopper, but you know what? It was the store manager now, our most expensive labor, running around the store trying to find something. Okay, well, let's solve that problem, but let's not try to, and it's just when you really start owning that customer, that shopper, and all the friction points and all of the things that could make their life better, you discover a very wide portfolio of opportunities to improve what you're doing.
Yeah. And to that point, as we wrap this up, I think one of the things you've said there is if we understand what the issue is, some of that can be handled, automatically. Some of it can be done through technology. And others, it's about the listening. I remember when it was at Zappos, I think, first began the online shoe business. And the customer service people there, they could talk to people for as long as those people wanted to be talked to. It was about building this relationship, particularly in those days when people they weren't sure, could I really order shoes online? What, you're going to ship me 5 pairs and then I can ship 4 back, whatever it is. And so they were building a relationship. And so that was who the customer care, that was their job, to build the relationship. And so I think, sometimes we lose all that as we get smarter or not. and the things we bring with us and the things we leave behind as we chase these bright, shining
Well, and a
things.
lot of the research is like a lot of people are using AI chatbots and
Mhm,
such as a customer service
mhm,
play because it's way more efficient. But the research that I've seen, I suggest very clearly that if you give a person an option to talk to a chatbot or a human, they pick human. And even though it's better in some ways, and why would you give away the one thing, that human connection
mhm.
with your customer in that moment when you're talking one on one? I just don't understand that. It's like
Yeah,
sometimes the most valuable things we have, but I think our KPIs and corporate ways we measure success still don't reflect the truth about life and that the human connection is more valuable. It's one of our most valuable things we have. And if you treated it that way, you would probably make sure I'm talking to that person directly and have that warmth come through that's never going to come through a chatbot.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
could sound like a Luddite, but I don't
No,
think it is.
I don't. It's because if you think about the human qualities that have not, or the needs that have not changed, we could do Maslow or
Yes.
whatever, but you think about that human connection, particularly in this day and age when we're so engaged
Yes.
with technology all the time and ourselves individually, that desire for connection becomes even greater. And I'll tell you, in all
Yes.
our latest work, where people are really trying to retain some degree of control, that
Mhm.
human connection is so important. And it's just, how do I use it? How do I value it? I mean, we could go back to Sam Walton and the Walmart greeter.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that story and that somebody saying, hi, g'day, welcome, all of that is so powerful because I'm now in somebody's home and I'm now, I walk into an experience, not just an acquisition of toilet paper or tissues or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, I saw it on that point quickly. I mean, I was watching, I went to the Walmart museum and I saw
Hmm.
this clip that the Walmart museum used to be in my scope.
Hmm.
I had, they were trying to keep the museum going and
Hmm.
supporting him anything he needed. But, he would find me these clips. And there was one clip where Sam rolled out the 10-foot rule. And it's him explaining to the company why this is important. And he said, you see a person within 10 feet, you greet them, you ask, how can I help you, kind of thing. And then he goes on to say something that doesn't often get talked about. He says, I know for many of you people, this is going to be uncomfortable. You probably are introverted. You don't necessarily want to do this, but trust me, this will be good for you. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh my, he said that out loud. It's kind of like he saw the human
Yeah.
connection is transformative for his own people,
Yeah. Yes.
for his own people to be better,
Yeah.
even if they didn't want to, that this could be an area of personal growth for you when you get able to talk to people and be able to. And he recognized that not
Yeah.
everybody's going to be comfortable with that. He was
Yeah.
very, very smart. But I
Yeah.
think you're right. He absolutely understood the importance of the human connection.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think as we wrap this up, to me, one of the things I'm looking at a lot over this next, I won't go 2 years, and that's 12
Yeah.
months, is really thinking about things like the role of the people in
Yes.
the experience. And those retailers, I think, curious to what I think that get it and are willing to fund and support it, they will be the ones that will win. Otherwise, I can buy anything everywhere that you and I have been saying for a long time at any price I want. I have total transparency if I choose to, if I want to take the time to do it. I don't have to even bother about getting out of my chair. And so
Yeah.
all of a sudden, think about chat, right? Think about AI and pricing transparency. Ooh, that's a race to the bottom. And how
Yeah.
do I engage in different ways? And how do I build that engagement? I don't even talk about loyalty anymore, but engagement with somebody that will continue to return to my place, whatever that place is. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on. So what are you keeping an eye on for the next little bit?
The same thing. I'm more interested in how do we coexist with agentic AI
Hmm.
and let it empower the human connection, not replace it.
Yeah.
And I fear that we could be down a path of just seeing it as an efficiency
Hmm.
play and not valuing the specialness of what it means to be human. And so there's lots of tasks in a retail environment or brand where, the agentic ecosystem, this could be perfect. It's great.
Hmm.
It's that. But then if you lose sight of the value of the real things that are important in life, the humanness of us and how that connection with shoppers is a human connection primarily, for it to be the things you're talking
Yeah.
about, for it to be loyalty, if you don't want to just be a race to the bottom in a commodity and just whatever, you don't want to just be, like you're giving your catalog to AI.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how do you then keep attachment? And I think I'll be talking about the next couple of years. It's just how do we prepare ourselves as humans? Because human intelligence, we've lost that, right? But what about human inventiveness, human insight, human instincts, human intuition, human interconnectedness? All right, there's so many things, but yet we don't really have a lot out there in academia or others to develop those pieces so that our humanness grows at the same speed as the AI intelligence grows. And so those would be things that I'm really kind of keeping my eye on.
Well, now you have the power to influence that with the chair at the school, which is very exciting. So I think that's a goal that's worthy of all of us if we actually pay attention.
Or even a big help on connecting me up to the right people who are doing this at other universities. And so I much appreciate it. It's much appreciated. And I'm going to be pulling you in to help me think about this too as we go.
A pleasure, as always, Andy, and anytime. Cheers for now.